Hello, and thank you so much for joining us once again here at Teacher Time with the Bill of Rights Institute. I'm Gary Coletti, Director of Teacher and Student Programs here at the Bill of Rights Institute. And it's nice to be back. It's the first episode I've been back in a while. You have been seeing our colleague and real lead of the show, Liz Evans. Liz, why don't you introduce yourself?
We're happy to have you back, Gary. Hi, everyone. I am Liz Evans. I am the Regional Programs Manager based in the lovely state of Arizona.
Thanks. And if this is your first time joining us, these episodes are what the title are. Time for teachers to chat about all things teaching, usually around U.S. history and civics, since that's what the Bill of Rights Institute is for, but really is to interact with you, either through questions that we have through social media or live if you're joining us now in our chat function. So if you have questions or comments throughout the show, we'd love to interact with you. Feel free to write into it. This is meant to be an interactive conversation. Speaking of which, we are thrilled to have a guest educator with us. Matthew Logan has joined us today, and he'll be here for the next 45 minutes or so, just to have time chatting with Teacher Time. Matthew, if I may call you that, why don't you introduce yourself and let our viewers know who you are?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. So I am a teacher here in Kennesaw, Georgia, at Harrison High School, just in the northern suburbs of Atlanta. I have been working with BRI for quite a while now. I've been on the teacher council for 2 years. I've attended lots of their amazing in-person trainings. And so I'm excited to be here. I can't wait to talk to you guys.
Absolutely. We love having you. Again, this is an interactive conversation. It's not scripted, off the cuff, but we have some questions. And so we hope, again, for you viewers out there, and you, Matt, and Liz, and myself, that we'll just get into it. So the topic of today is called I Am a Teacher, and recognizing that we are human beings whose role is teaching, and that we also have other lives, other hobbies, other things going on that sometimes make their way into the classroom and sometimes are completely separate and breaks from the classroom. But before getting into all of that as our overarching theme, we do like to start with something that is outside our classroom usually, that sometimes permeates in and sometimes is a break, and that is our news cycle. So we like to sort of start off every episode with just a brief touch upon what's going on in the news. Again, we are not journalists. We are here for educators, but as social studies educators, often what's in the news kind of gets in there. And so we're going to spend just a little bit of time on that. And I want to toss it all out to you first. This is mid-May 2021 for anybody who's watching this, perhaps upon record. What's on our minds in the news?
Matt, I'm going to let you go first on this one because the one you had was super interesting.
Well, thanks, Liz. So I think the topic that I find most interesting is how we are going to choose to govern social media in the future. So this kind of came to my mind yesterday. I was listening to a podcast and I heard that Facebook had sponsored an ad in support of changing Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which, at first glance is kind of strange because that protects them. They have a lot of protection from that law, from that particular section of that law. And so I think probably what we're about to see is a really interesting conversation between our government and social media providers like Facebook. And obviously the hope is that the users of these social media platforms will have something to say about how they think social media sites should be governed, if any changes should be made. I know my students have opinions about social media and how it should be governed and whether it should be governed. Maybe some of them might have the opinion that they should be totally left alone. But I think that is probably the news topic that I could do the most things with in my classroom because my students are so interested in social media now. And don't ask me my opinion. I don't know that I have one yet. I don't know enough to know what I think about this, which I like those kinds of topics, right? Those kinds of topics where you don't really know where you stand. I think my students do too. So that's my topic.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great one. And I still find, even though it's been around quite a while, I still find it interesting that there are actual ways that social media makes it into actual curriculum. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely. anytime there is a social media incident that makes national news, we typically talk about it. I don't know if you guys remember, maybe it was 2 weeks ago now, maybe 3. There was the court case about the young lady who had, said some unfortunate things about her cheerleading team, her opinion of her school, off school property, off school time, and was punished for it. And that made it obviously to state court and to federal court ultimately. Students really found that interesting. Some really strong opinions on that. And anytime you get free speech and social media mixing, you get interested students.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I the ones that not only have a kind of built-in hook because it's something that may be on their mind already, but also even in your description lead to bigger questions, right? That it's about this story, but it's very easy for students to see how that becomes a bigger question. I mean, to leap from what's happening in the news to the concept of privacy is not a far leap for students of all ages. And I think that's amazing. Liz,
Exactly.
I bet you go ahead, Matt.
But yeah, I was going to say exactly. We teach, say, a court case like Tinker versus Des Moines. My students can't imagine themselves wearing armbands and protesting, the Vietnam War, obviously, but they can imagine themselves having, freedom of speech challenges to what they say on social media, and it makes it real for them. Like you said, it's that connection into a legal, issue, a free speech issue. So, absolutely, that's one of the great things about teaching civics or U.S. history or governments. Those topics are everywhere for us.
I think what makes it even better is, and I love what you said about I don't actually know what I think about that yet. I think that's such good modeling for students because, yeah, I don't know. I don't have enough information. And to be very frank, social media is a fairly, I'm going to say new thing because I sure didn't have it in high school or in college. Maybe that dates me, but I really don't care. But it's fairly new. So having an understanding of how privacy and free speech apply to it is so interesting. So you bring up the Supreme Court. My little bit of news is that the Supreme Court is actually going to listen to arguments on a Mississippi law that bans abortions after 15 weeks, which is in direct conflict with Roe versus Wade. So it's an interesting thing because Roe v. Wade is required for AP government. It's also very interesting because, the writers of the law just said, we're writing this to challenge Roe versus Wade. And it's something that this is the first abortion case that this current court will have heard. The Supreme Court in general has heard since Roe versus Wade cases, but this is kind of that first one. So that's an interesting thing for teachers, especially the government teachers out there. In the US history, when we're talking about feminist movement, to kind of watch and see, because it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Because again, Roe versus Wade sets a certain standard and this law is in direct conflict. So the fact that the court said that they'll listen to it is going to make for an interesting term next year.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. In both of your cases, again, there's this sort of natural approach to these topics with that teacher idea, right? How can you go back in time? What do you need to research? What is it that students, what is the big overarching question? How do you support that? How do you take sides on that? How do you take sides is stronger? I should say, I'm thinking about the historical thinking skills. It's always on my mind lately. And things of, taking a stand, making a premise based on evidence, I think is a really important one. Got word in our chat that's forwarded to us. By the way, we don't see the whole chat. We just get some questions that pop up from a Matt Lyons talking about social media sites and, whether or not you can disagree with their ideas. He says that have made it clear that if you disagree with their ideas, they remove you. He's not excited about government cooperating with social media to come up with fair rules. But that's part of what makes social studies interesting, right? So you have this concept of fairness, the concept of freedom of expression, the concept of private organizations versus what media means and what their role is, any kind of precedent. How do you decide? How does government interact with the private, private realm? Immediately mind-boggling things that come out of topics like this. So
I'll speak for myself as an AP teacher. One of the hardest things to teach is the bureaucracy, and one of the hardest things to bring to life for students is, at least in my opinion, the bureaucracy and how it all works and how important it is. Well, this could be a great example of a company like Facebook or other companies like Facebook, cozying up preemptively in a way to the people that will regulate them, as well as the lawmakers who are going to write the laws that the regulators use to regulate them, and are tasked with enforcement of these new laws if any are written. So, yeah, this is I think a lot of students would share your concern, Matt, and I think a lot maybe wouldn't, to be honest. I think some probably are very trusting of these companies, for better or for worse. But you could have some really cool conversation about fairness in the execution of the laws, the enforcement of the law, and how fair is it to have the biggest social media players helping our government write the laws that govern us and govern those sites. So yeah, excellent point. For sure. And I see in the chat too that asked for good articles about the topic. None off the top of my head.
I will say this is our partners in the civics world. The Constitution Center has some really good podcasts and articles on that. And also, Mr. Logan, thank you very much for that wonderful example of the iron triangle, which I think that a lot of people really struggle with. And I want to like clip that and put it somewhere for teachers, because it's an example of these small sub-governments and how they operate and how they work. And this is just a clear example of it.
Well, a lot in the news, but again, we do like to sort of move on just time-wise. And so as we said, our theme today, and we invite you out there who are watching live to contribute as well, either ideas or thoughts to this one. And our overarching theme, again, is I am a teacher and ellipsis, ... something else. Our big question being, beyond educator, a role one has, what are other areas of interest that you have, and what does that mean for the classroom? So we're going to move over to then a new segment here called the art and science of teaching, as we like to say that, teaching there are structures, there's sort of a science to it, but there's also an art to it, right? There's a very personalized approach. There's a very human approach to teaching, and it's really kind of a combination of both. And so for this segment, that's our big question. How do our hobbies help shape who we are as educators? I'm going to ask Matt first, since you are our guest.
Well, I can just speak for myself, but when I, interact with anybody, if I don't know a little bit about them, I find the interaction to be a bit flat. If I know something about somebody's background, the things they're into, the things that really make them tick, I tend to find my interactions with those people to be more interesting and more meaningful. So I think the same thing holds true for teachers. I think, having hobbies, obviously being open about those hobbies with your students is a way to create a richer environment for everybody. And selfishly for me, so I can talk about the things that I'm interested in with my students, and to kind of get them involved. They may be into those things as well. They may have, new things to teach me. I can't tell you how many, new bands I've heard because students know the types of music that I listen to. And so they will communicate to me what I should be listening to. Another great example of how your hobbies can, sort of help you in the classroom or sort of make your classroom better or different is students know that when I was in high school, I was in a punk rock band, which blows their mind, at first. They get it eventually, but they pretty soon the kids that are into that type of music start to come out a bit of the shell. Just this last semester, I had a student say, "Hey, I have a bass." He played bass guitar. "I have a bass cover channel on YouTube. If you subscribe, every day I post a bass cover of like a rock." I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I subscribed to his YouTube channel, and he shares bass covers of a lot of old, really good rock and roll songs. And I love it. So just because I shared one of my hobbies, I love music, I love playing music with my students, I then get that richness back from them. They share their hobbies with me. They invite me to their YouTube channel. Very, very modern, But yeah, Gary, hobbies are important for anybody in any situation, especially as teachers. Our job is to interact with people every day. I have my students I think I did the math once, is 7.5 hours a week. Mm-hmm. For 5 months, we're on a block schedule here. So you had better do more than just communicate content in that 7 hours, or they are going to check out on you. I would check out on me too, if that's all I did. So hobbies are at the core to me of any person being an interesting person. And as a teacher, half my job is to be an interesting person. So hobbies are there in the core of that, I think.
Yeah, I completely understand it, because it's interesting the effect that it has on you, right? You, the not you, Matt, not just you, Matt, one has on one. Kind of, I think it does give depth. It's organic, right? It's something you chose to do. It's not like, you have to have a hobby. It's just one of those things that shows real personalization. But often, if it is shared, I agree with you. It's this external thing that is kind of innocuous a lot of the time, right? It's often not controversial if you just share something in common. I've often referred to like celebrities or like TV shows as like the friends we all have in common, right? We like to, if we have a friend in common, like talk about that. Well, then we have these external things. Could be a team, right? Could be a sport, a hobby. I'm saying this, it's mid-May for all of our Met fans out there. We're doing pretty well right now. I don't want to say anything, but it's one of those things that you can have a conversation with somebody you've never met. And like you said, with students, you may have 150 individuals who, at least there's something else you could talk about that isn't class. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And it might, sometimes you find those inroads to class, maybe not even on purpose, but I completely agree with that. Liz, what do you think?
I think that sometimes our identity as educators, like we get so wrapped up in that, right? And I remember the first time I was teaching middle school and one of my kids saw me at Target, and it just blew their mind that I'm somewhere outside of it. And I think that was one of the moments where I realized that I want to share who I am, right? I love sports. Like we're talking about sport. I love college football. I'm a very, very dedicated Iowa Hawkeye fan. I love college basketball. My cousin played college basketball, and Gary, you said things aren't controversial. I don't know where you're all from. Here it's very controversial. U of A or ASU. Like that is a very divisive thing. But it's fun. And, Matt Lyons in the chat talks about martial arts, gardening, politics, cartoons, comic, and the Renaissance Festival. We have one of those in Arizona.
Yeah, I love those.
But they help you, you're right, Matt, they help you reach all of these different kids, and you're looking at different perspectives. And I think that's one of the most fun things about being a teacher, right? Is that you get to interact. I mean, in some years, I had 180 kids between all my classes, and I get to interact with them and be a part of that. And I think that when you talk about your hobbies, or even if you're just super passionate about something, the kids see you and they're like, you're a human, you're a person, and that's fun. And I want to share what I really like with you. So I think that that's just, people think like, oh, well, anybody can teach. And it's like, man, there's so much more of a human aspect to it. And sharing our hobbies and sharing our passions with students, I think can be a really incredible thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's refreshing. It's whimsy, right? It's not some other, required thing. Like I said before, exactly. Like it's who you are because you choose to be that way, like it or not. You may not share that interest, but I mean, heck of it if it doesn't, intrigue someone to say, what is this thing that you like? And, as I said before, it might be a different kind of music, might be a different kind of art. And, I've had students who initially were scoffing at things that I enjoyed, come back and say, I did try to go to that museum and actually it wasn't so bad. I don't tell everybody I said that, and it's just sort of gives one little extra dimension, even to themselves, or not. Not required. It's not like I'm asking anybody to do a report on this hobby. It's just mentioned. So I think that's exactly right. I think that's great. And speaking of whimsy, then I think that means it's time to continue a little bit with this idea of hobbies, but really to get into something that we like to call sometimes in class a brain break, right? Just clear the mind out. Have a question. This is just for fun. Still on the topic a little bit. Here's our question. If you had infinite time, what hobby would you want to explore? And I feel like built into that might be one that you may already do. You may not do it at all. But infinite time, what would you like really dive into? Liz, why don't you go first?
So I'm a mom and a wife. So I have to take that into account because I would take them with me. But for me, it's traveling and reading. I mean, Matt and I share a really awesome experience. We just happened to be at a PD together in Charlottesville when UVA won the national championship. And it's such a fun, I just love traveling. I love going different places and exploring, there and being a part of their world. Because I mean, I love Arizona and there's lots of places to travel here. But I think that with infinite time and infinite money, I would want to just honestly, I just want to travel and explore and like you said, Gary, like go to museums and go to coffee shops and eat like sporting events. I love going to sporting events in different cities because you get to experience that. One of my favorite memories is we took our dad to Iowa City to see an Iowa Hawkeye game. They played Wisconsin and they won. But just being immersed in that college culture of this little part of our country was just so incredible to me. So my answer is traveling. And then on the plane, I would just read and read and read and read because I like reading.
Yeah.
I don't know. What about you, Matt?
Liz, that's a good answer. I would probably travel a lot too. And I would definitely do like a minor league baseball tour. Use that as the excuse to drive, right? I got to start planning that now. No, I think my hobby would probably be carpentry. So I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid, my grandfather was very handy. He seemed to know how to do everything. And I think he learned how to do everything because he had to. It was part of his survival skills. But a lot of us are lucky in ways, and we don't have to learn those skills. And so carpentry is something that I've here and there been able to experiment with. I've worked with my dad on some projects, and I know my way around some power tools. But in terms of tackling a whole project, I want the time to build a log cabin. I want to cut trees. Good. I want to shave the bark. I want to pile them up and build a house. This is probably one of those dreams that remains a dream. But if I had enough time to learn the skills, to actually obtain the material, to lay it out and do it, I can't imagine a better way to spend a couple months than building a house.
Do you have anywhere you'd want to build it? Like, is there a particular place?
Well, yes. Well, you got to be careful when you. Yes, but when you get on YouTube, sometimes you go down the rabbit hole. It's a wonderful thing and it's a terrible thing. But there are a series of videos that a young man made a few years ago of him building a cabin from hand, all with hand tools. Mm-hmm. I don't think he had any power tools. I don't even think he had a power drill. Above the Arctic Circle in Sweden. So building it somewhere in the cold like that would be kind of interesting to me because it ups the challenge a bit, right? You have to build it, to code, so to speak. You have to build it to stay warm enough that you can survive through a winter. And he had some really interesting techniques that he would use. It was really it was artistic. The way he was combining these elements and insulating his little cabin he was building. So I would want to build it somewhere really cold. Somewhere really cold. I'm talking above the Arctic Circle cold.
Wow.
If you ever do it, will you promise to? I've seen the YouTube thing you're talking about. Will you promise to make a YouTube series on it? I love that series.
We got a profit. So I have to monetize it so that I can come back and build more.
Yes.
Arctic Circle cabins.
I love that there's two levels to it. There's like as if just building the house isn't enough. You have to do
exactly.
it.
Exactly.
Yes. I have to wax for a moment. It reminds me of my father's high school. He was at a high school where that was one of the classes he had. The school was large enough that they built a working house every year inside the school. So the kids from start to every part of it with electricity and foundation and everything from scratch. That was their year. Was at the end of the year they had a finished house. Don't ask me what happened to the house every year afterwards. I'm now realizing I need to ask more questions about that. But there's something about getting lost in it. And I think I hear what you're saying, Matt, right? Because the question was about time. And I think getting lost in it, that's how it's something that's different than, I'm going to carve out 2 or 3 hours to go play golf or something like that, right? That's like a set. Because I was thinking that too, like in terms of if I was thinking about with infinite time, painting and arts, you have to, like the amount of time it takes to have the time and then set aside everything, and then to get lost in it where the hours can just fly by and it's just out. And like you, I mean, you mentioned months for a house. I mean, you just have to let the time go by. And I think that's sometimes the hardest part of it, even if, you know, the world makes you at home for a little while, there's still something about finding time. That's a huge part of it. But I think it's so important. And I think it's a key thing to value, I think, for oneself, is trying. And I know it seems impossible, but trying to find that is something I have to remind myself to do as well. And I'm sure many teachers out there feel similarly to that. Speaking of time, it is time for our next segment. See how these just kind of move along? Our timed segment here is called the 7-minute stretch. I say that because I will put a set time on our clock of 7 minutes. If you're mid-sentence, don't worry, I will not interrupt you. But in 7 minutes, we invite our guests, so Matt and Liz and I, to discuss a question just for 7 minutes. And I see our chat. I see a Matt and a Jay, who is a USF, which as an East Coast, I feel like that's a sportsy thing. I said Mets. That's as far as I go with knowing sports stuff. Go Bucks. Also, I'm going to go with that's probably a team of some sort. I'm angering Liz.
Have a meeting.
I am making you.
You're not. I like that they said that though, because so Matt Lyon's talking about a Texas A&M game. I mean, my real dream in life is to go to every college football game, starting with the Big Ten, because the Big Ten is my favorite conference. And then I'd go down south though, because I have seen some awesome stuff. So yes. Gary, I feel like I'm just going to make you a cheat sheet of all these sports.
I'm honestly not. Again, this is unscripted. The high school I taught at used to have me call the one of the games because I had no idea what was happening. And so I was in the giant booth. And I would just be like, well, and they're approaching. It looks like there's a big line in the middle of the field. It looks like a halfway part that probably is important. And like. It was this was what?
Is there a tape of this somewhere?
I'm probably not. I don't know. I think it was just pure comedy gold because my high school was just, and had a great football team too. So having somebody who had no idea what was going on was hilarious to them. Anyway, 7-minute stretch. Again, we invite everyone in our chat to join with this question. It's actually not a question. It is ruminating for 7 minutes on this topic. Ready? Imagine hobbies that we have that have translated into the classroom or allowed us to take a break from the classroom. So can you think of hobbies that have either translated into the classroom or allowed you to take a break from the classroom entirely?
I definitely can. One of my hobbies is watching movies, and I don't mean just on a Saturday night streaming a movie or two. I'm in deep, Gary. I'm in deep. If it's been released, I need to see it. I feel a need to encyclopedic.
We're all friends here. Just get it out. That's good.
Yeah, well, it's this is an intervention, but yeah, it's probably getting unhealthy, but I'm into it. It's what I like. I like to see movies, and I want to see them all. So one day it occurred to my department chair at the previous school that I taught that the state of Georgia allows a course to be taught called U.S. History in Film.
Wow.
There are no standards. It's just a course that you can teach. And he said, hey, I don't know if you know this, but enrollment this year was down. So we're going to be able to have a free block for you. What do you want to do there?
Wow.
U.S. History and Film. So I immediately went to work that summer, figuring out what movies I'm gonna show, try to pick the most off the wall, things I could come up with your classics. You show Saving Private Ryan, you show all the American history classics, but had an absolute blast doing it. Probably the crowning achievement of my professional career so far was somehow pulling that class off, and I hope that my students of that course would tell you that they learned a lot too, and that they now have a passion for film, and hopefully a hobby that they just pursue on their own for film. But I never thought that my passion and interest, and again very unhealthy purchasing of DVDs, It's so handy. But in my profession, just right there, no, didn't need the library to, rent anything for me, didn't need any funding for anything. I had them and I was ready to go. So my hobby truly paid off.
That's incredible. Were there any standout surprises in the class that students really responded to that you were perhaps not expecting?
Yes, absolutely. I did a section in the course. I called it Other Perspectives on World War II, which was really just an excuse to talk about World War II more. It's a very interesting time in history. So I called it Other Perspectives in World War II, and I showed a couple of different movies. I showed Cranes Are Flying, a Russian classic. Showed Miss Miniver about the Blitz in London. And I showed a movie, it's a Dutch movie, that it was, I think it was nominated for a Golden Globe, and maybe it won, but it's called Land of Mine. And it's basically about Hitler or somebody in German high command suspected that the Allies may invade England, or it may invade Europe through Denmark. And so they mined the coasts really heavily. Well, when the war's over, obviously, there was no invasion there. So the mines are left on the beach, and they were cleared. And, this is all historical. They were cleared by Nazi war prisoners, mostly. There's some interesting history there too, but the film just followed these young men that were in the German army clearing the beaches in Denmark. And, it was obviously incredibly dangerous, and many of them died. And I thought I was just showing, what was it like to have lived through World War II somewhere other than America, somewhere that actually experienced the war, and showing what the Dutch citizens, the Danish, I should say, citizens felt like. And they loved the movie. At the end of the year, I polled them on what their favorite movie was. 9 out of 10 students said Land of Mine, this odd, small Danish movie about landmines. It was very surprising. But they loved it.
I need to see that. My family is Danish, and I've done a lot of research on World War II and Denmark, and how they sent the Jews to Sweden. They've done all of this stuff because it's very and Denmark's not a large country. It's smaller than the state of Arizona, and I've never heard of that. I have to tell you, Matt, I think it was 2 or 3 months ago. So we have a book club within the Bill of Rights Institute that we all nerd out. This one is on the Code Talkers is our next one, but we did one on, it was real history, but REEL, but it was about cinema and how it portrays history. And it was incredibly fascinating. And then I had to say out loud to a group of history buffs that I've never seen the movie Glory. I have not seen it. I will at some point.
Liz, it's very long. In your defense, it's a very
Well, with 2 minutes to go, Liz, I'm going to yield my time to you. How about you? Hobbies that have either permeated or
so I think the one, because I'm a mom and I was a department chair, I did so much. And so for me, for a really long time, running was a hobby that just got me out of teaching. It let me have, however long I had, because with kids, you just never know what their day is going to be. But that was my time to, honestly, I'd pop on a podcast that had nothing to do with history, nothing to do with teaching. And I would just put that in and just be somewhere else for 20 to 30 minutes. Actually ended up running a couple half marathons because it was I'm doing all this running, I might as well run for something. But that was just, and I would share that with my kids. And that's how I taught them how to write essays, as I would always tell them, your essay at the end is the half marathon, but we got to do all these other things to get you there. Cause I'm not going to just put my shoes on one day and run 13.1 miles. It could, but it hurt myself. But it's talking about the training. And the year that I ran my first half marathon, my daughter was 7 months old, but my kids were so invested and they'd ask me about my training and ask me about all of this. So I think that it's a nice thing too, sometimes to have a hobby outside of teaching that just puts you back in because then I always felt when I went back in the classroom, I've had time for me. I've done all that. So when at the time I was teaching middle school, so when my middle schoolers were crazy, it didn't bother me as much because I'm like, well, I was able to have my alone time. And now I felt like I was a better teacher because
yeah.
so that was my hobby, was being the key word because I don't run anymore.
Well, we've run out of time on 7 minutes. I can't say mine. But Jay Miller says he would teach a class at local college Civil War film. All right, 10 seconds. My very first and very last class teaching in classroom was history through food. So whole other thing to talk about. But that's I find that actually kids get really, really into that, like the nature of that. Did also teach a lot of world history too, but you could do US history. It's there's quite a lot there, but that's way too much for the time that we have. See what happens here on Teacher Time. You always run out of time. But we do like to wrap up. Again, the purpose of Teacher Time is to engage teachers across the country in dialogue, whether or not it is live or in between episodes. In between episodes, we do have questions that we'll raise on the episode. We also have mail. We have a mailbag. So again, if you have a question maybe that doesn't fit into one of our episodes, but you want us to ask it, feel free to ask it. You can ask us anywhere in our social medias at BR Institute, Bill of Rights Institute, or through Facebook, Twitter, even LinkedIn. We monitor all those things. Now, Liz and Matthew, you have not seen this question ahead of time. So fresh off the question, here's one. Kind of related, strangely, but a general question. How do you keep up with kids' culture? So the back end of this is from Mallory in Virginia. So things like their sayings, the games they're into, the music they're into. You mentioned that a little bit earlier, but how do you go about really keeping up with what they're actually into culturally?
Well, it's hard, Gary, to answer. It's very unique. It's inscrutable sometimes, exactly what it is that they're into or what's going on culturally with them. But I don't know, I think I pride myself on, in general, having a very kind of open air to my classroom. We're just talking most of the time. We're just talking. It's usually about academic subjects, but we're getting to know each other. And somehow it always kind of seeps in a bit, what they're listening to, what they're into. Why is this particular brand big now? I think I had someone once ask me, was Champion a big brand when you were a kid? I said, yeah, it was workout clothes. It was workout clothes, Yeah. They're like, yeah, it's, well, my mom and my dad were telling me that. Why did it get so popular? Why are all the kids wearing it now? I don't know. You tell me. I have no idea. But little conversations like that tend to happen just naturally in your classroom. And you can get a view into their culture. Again, it's sometimes as, a aging older, I'm 35. It's hard to grasp exactly what it is going on in their culture. I mean, I think it's supposed to be that way, right? I think we're supposed to get it. So, but yeah, and sometimes I just reach out. I ask, what are the kids listening to these days? And then they make fun of me for phrasing it that way. And then they tell me what the kids are listening to. So, but yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Liz, what do you do?
I would always just ask them because I'm a really nosy person. When in my classroom, it was always just like, what are you guys listening to? Why do you like that? And I always started class with music because I'd turn on a song, I'd go out in the hall and greet everybody's kids. Cause I didn't have windows in my classroom. So it was my break from my little thing. I think just showing a genuine interest. I just genuinely want to know what you like and why these things are. When they say words, I'm like, can I get a dictionary? What does that mean? Which again, fits right into our primary sources because you don't understand how they were talking in the 1800s and would just try to make jokes about it. I think I'm like you, Matt. I try to understand it, but at the same time, it's but I don't have to. I'm a 40-year-old woman. It's totally fine that I live in the world that I live in. I'm not really sure what generation I fall into but luckily too, I have a 10-year-old daughter. So I learn a lot of stuff, but I'm going to be honest. My students set up my Twitter account for me a long time ago. because I know how to do it. And it was like, you guys know how to do something that I don't. You want to help me? You want to show me how to use this? And I think when they know an adult is genuinely interested in them, that's when they open up. And if they don't want to open up, maybe that's just something I don't need to know then. That was me.
Yeah, Liz, the reason I have Wi-Fi access at my school is because my students, fit to tell me the password so that I can get on the Wi-Fi. So yeah, one of the things that they do more often than really anything is they teach me what social media sites are being used. Now, how to use them, I don't really know why exactly they're being used. I really don't know why they're better or worse than some other site. Also don't know, but it's definitely something that they communicate.
Yeah. And I'll agree with that too. There has to be, I think you used the word authentic or genuine, like there needs to be that genuine curiosity. I found that I more quickly than others was, maybe because of my aging, was distancing from getting what was, maybe I was never into what was real. I don't know. But I found clubs helped, like having downtime, having unstructured time often would bring up, hey, a song. And it wasn't like, I'm trying to study you, or I want to understand your ways. It was just more like, what is this tune? Is this really into it? And so like you'd hear a name of an artist, hear, a musician here and there. And it's just, you bring it up and it's just sort of like, oh, maybe this is really interesting. And it just has to kind of roll out organically. It's not something you could force. I found that being too far away was alienating, but trying to be like, hey, fellow youths was not helping either, because I was not that person. And so just like a true organic interest in some of it, but not all of it. And to say, I don't love that. Food, music, any of those things, you're not going to love all of it, and you can't try to be like somebody else. But I think if we're going to model, if we want them, we started off by sort of talking about how engaging students by having them interested in who we are otherwise, it works both ways, right? It works for them and who they are otherwise. And they are not just students, they are also may have after school jobs or parts of their family and things like this, or just have sometimes the wildest hobbies just become the most amazing things. Talent shows, those were fun. Hosted a bunch of those.
They do those anymore? I feel like the talent show at a school, and granted, this last year was weird, but I feel like even
we hosted them every year in our school, and it was amazing. It's like things that would take a long time to master. It's like, wow, you spent many, many years on this thing that if we didn't have, those are good opportunities. I'm plugging for talent shows. So all the teachers out there, if you have a school, they're amazing.
They are, and you get to know your kids, because when I taught 8th grade, it was like my 3rd year teaching. We had a talent show, and one of my students had a band, and they played Man in a Box by Alice in Chains, and it was the most incredible. Like, it was awesome.
Yeah.
He was like, oh yeah, this is what I do when I go home. Like, sometimes I don't get my homework done because I'm just playing my guitar, and I'm like, yeah. Good for you, man. That was incredible.
Yeah, right?
Yes. See? Let's start a hashtag. Bring talent shows back.
Bring talent shows back. We are teachers and they are students, and also more to discover. So I think that's an amazing note to end on. And we've hit our 45 minutes, as we mentioned. I wish we could go longer. If we had infinite time, what would we do? Travel and read or watch more movies? But I want to say a sincere thank you to Matthew Logan for joining us this week. It's been such a pleasure. I hope we chat more in the future. Liz, always good to see you as well. And to everyone out there, honestly, thank you for tuning in. We're glad to have you live. If you're watching us later, we're happy to see you too. If you like this video, make sure you can subscribe to our channel and come back on June 1st for another Teacher Time. Theme of that one is summer mode. Our June episode is all about summer mode. We call it summer mode because it's not like, it's like a transition for teachers. You're still doing stuff. It's just different stuff. And so that's what summer mode is all about. We've got a question for everybody out there for the next one. So if you do join us in 2 weeks, our questions are going to be, what are summers like for teachers? And how will this summer, the summer of 2021, be the same or different than in years past? That's what we'll be discussing in 2 weeks. So I hope you'll join us there live.
It's our finale, Gary. It's
oh my God.
Season 1 finale.
It is our season 1 finale. Again, being teacher time, it's the season is ending. That's what happens this time of year. And so we hope you join us for that one. If you're going to join us at all, come in 2 weeks or our June 1st. We'll have our guest Molly Schneider for that episode. So I'm very excited. She's great. And so we do put out new episodes of lots of other things. We put new episodes of this on Tuesdays, but basically every week there's at least 2 new episodes of things that happen that you can come watch. So if you do subscribe, you'll see all that. All things U.S. history, including close reads of primary sources, which are great, interviews with distinguished scholars from across the country, homework help videos, great videos if you don't use them, real short, to the point videos meant for students. And it's just, they're really great. So hopefully you'll see it here. You can check us out on Facebook or Twitter, Instagram for updates on all these programs. Events, we'll be having increasing events. Those are not stopping through the summer and ongoing, and other ways to get involved. There's just lots of ways to get involved. So basically, long story short, we would love to hear from you. So you can comment your thoughts on the video below. Get in touch with us through social media, through the hashtag BRI Teacher Time, or any through our socials, which you should see if you're on YouTube right below us, all that list there. So once again, thank you, Matt. Thanks, Liz. Great talking to you. And hopefully we'll see everybody in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everyone.